Hi, we've been talking about how to set up proportions to do proportional reasoning with problems. We're now going to be talking about how do you do it with word phrases, and we're also going to show you, I'm going to show you how you set up a proportion to solve and how you solve it with an equation. Now we've done the equation piece, but we're just going to go over it quickly. The thing you're going to see me do most is going to be how to solve it with using proportions. First of all, we know that a percent, just to review, is a comparison or a ratio that compares a number to 100. That means if I've got 20%, it's going to be 20 over 100. The denominator will always be 100 in a fraction when we're talking percents. Very important concept number one. You're always going to have your is number on the top of your of number. So is in the numerator, of is in the denominator. And it will always be equal to whatever your percent is over 100. Or think about it as the part over the whole when we were talking about fractions is equal to whatever the percent is over 100. These two are set up in proportions. Steps for using a proportion. You're always going to write your percent over 100. We've learned that in the first quarter of this year that anything over 100 can be a percent. Write the is number over the of number. The is will always go into the numerator and the of number will always go into the denominator. You're going to substitute the variable for the unknown like we've been doing since quarter one, and you're going to solve your proportion for the missing number. All right, let's do a couple of these. Make sure you write all this down. If you have to pause the video at any time to make sure that you get this on your piece of paper, please do so. All right, we're going to use these problems and solving them by proportions. I've got 12 is, so I've got 12 is, there's my is number. I've got my percent of what number? Of what number is what is missing. So my is, and I'm just going to write it up here, is over of, just so you can remember it. My is number is 12. My of number is what is missing. So I'm going to use an X for that, and my percent is 40 over 100. Okay? So I'm going to cross multiply like we've been doing with proportions, and I'm going to get 40x is equal to 1200 or 1200. Okay, when we do this, I'm going to divide out by 40 each side because I have to isolate my variable, and I've got to use the division because I am multiplying by 40 with the x to do so, and I know that 1200 divided by 40 is going to equal to, x will equal to 30. So I'm going to read it as 12 is 40% of 30. Okay? Now let's look at this one. It says 40 is, here's my is number. What percent? What percent is what I'm trying to find? Of is my 5. It's going to be 5. So is going to be 40 over 5 is going to be what percent? I don't know my percent, but I know all percents are over 100 as far as fractions. I'm going to cross multiply. Now before we do that, I want you to notice that 40 in the numerator is much larger than 5 in the denominator. So the number over 100 is going to be much larger than 100. Actually 8 times, because if I say 40 divided by 5, it really goes in there 8 times. So it's going to be 8, this number is going to be 8 times greater than that, which is going to be 800. And we're going to solve it through a proportion to show you. 5 times x is 5x equals, and I know 40 times 100 is 4,000. When I divide each side by doing the inverse operation, I'm going to say x is equal to, and I know that is going to equal to 800. But notice it says 40 is what percent of 5? We're looking for percent, so it is 800. 40 is 800% of 5, and that makes sense. Now we're going to find 60% of what number? The is number is missing. So this is the is. I don't know what it is, so I'm going to make it an X. My of number is 85, so I'm going to put 85 in the denominator and equal to 60%, which is 60 over 0, or over 100, I'm sorry. Cross multiply, and I'm going to be using my calculator here because I'm going to say x times 100 is 100x equals, and I've got 60 times 85, which I know if I plug it into my calculator is going to be 55,100 or 5,100. Divide both sides by 100 because I've got to isolate my variable, and I know that 100 will go into 5,100 or 5,100 51 times. So when I reread this, it's going to say 51 is 60% of 85. Okay? Now let's take a look at what we need to do for, and I've kind of scratched off some of this, I hope you can read it, what we have to do if we're going to solve them as an equation. If we're going to do the steps of an equation, here are your 4 steps. One is to change all percents to decimals. This is a major step in using this as percents, as using these when you're talking about percents in an equation. You've got to change your percent into a decimal. Change the word of for your multiplication sign, and you know that the word is equal. All right, you're going to change that as the equal sign. Then the third step, just like your third step in using proportions, is going to be to substitute a variable for the unknown. And your fourth step is really going to be about the same. You're going to solve the equation. Now, the only difference is if you're looking for a percent, you've always got to change that decimal back into a percent. So this is the biggie here if you're going to be using equations. Let's do some of these. I've got 15 is 25% of what number? Well, I know that is going to be equal. I know that I've got to change this percent into a decimal, which means I've got to bring it 2 places to the left, so that's going to be 0.25. Of, my name is here, is going to be multiply what number? I don't know. So I'm going to say 15 is, let's go ahead and rewrite it down here, 0.25 times x. So I know that if I just put them side by side, that they are going to be multiplied. So what have I got to do to isolate the variable x? I've got to do the inverse of multiplication, so I've got to divide either side by 0.25. And when I do this, I know that x is going to equal to 60. So I'm going to use my calculator and say 15 divided by 1/4 or 0.25 or 25 hundredths is going to equal to 60. So it's going to read 15 is 25% of what number is going to be, my number is going to be, the number is going to be 60. Now here's one, what percent of, that's my multiplication, 300 is 129. Okay, we know is equal. So we're going to say what percent, I don't know my percent, times 300 is 129. Well, I know if I'm multiplying x and 300 together, I have to, and we could easily do it this way, divide 300 by both sides. And I know 300 is going to be larger than 129. So my answer is going to be a decimal. So when I do this, I have x is equal to 0.43. Now, this is where you have to be careful. It's asking for what percent? Well, I've got my answer is a decimal. So how do I change my decimal to a percent? I've got to move that decimal 2 places over to the right. So x is going to actually equal to 43%. And it would read 43% of 300 is 129. Let's do this one. You've got a what we don't know, is going to be equal, and I know that I've got to change this 95% to 0.95 of, this is multiplication, 40. Okay? Let's just go ahead and rewrite that. So what I'm doing is I'm multiplying, this one's fairly easy, 0.95 times my 40, and I just have to take out my calculator and put that in, and that will give me my answer, which is going to be x is equal to 38. So it would read 38 is 95% of 40. Okay, You've got a you try place on your sheet. I want you to try these. I have asked you to do the first 3 as proportion solving and the other 3 as doing it for equations. I've already written out the answers, and I want you to write down step by step how we've just done it, and I want you to solve for the answers, pause the video, and come back to see if you did it correctly. Okay? Just push play when you're ready. Take the time to check these. If you did not do any of them correctly, you need to rework them on your paper so they come out correctly, so you have something that you can work with if we're ever coming down to solving this again. You've got something you can check. So just check it. Make sure you check your answers. If you did not do it correctly, make sure you correct them now. And we'll see you in class tomorrow.